Hello and welcome to the Ruth MacFit Podcast. Very, very happy to be here with you today. I've started to record this episode so many times, but I've had somebody arrive at the door, a phone call come in that looked like it was one that I needed to take. I should have just left my phone in another room. Lessons are learned. Anyway, I'm always very happy to be here with you. And you might have noticed that my podcast episodes tend to be about mindset. I am someone who helps women in midlife feel fitter, stronger, healthier, and help them with losing body fat. And often we can think that this is movement, exercise, and nutrition. And why aren't Ruth's podcasts all about that? And that is because it's always about the big picture. We have to take into consideration our lifestyle and what's going on, what is expected of us in our day-to-day, so that we can be realistic and so that we can sustain the progress we've made. We might manage a plan that is going to work for everyone else for a short period of time, but you don't want to normally just be achieving fat loss for a short period of time. You want to be able to get there and stay there. And that means doing it in a way that feels good now, because it's much easier to keep going on a journey when you're feeling great while you're doing it. So what I want to talk to you about today is something that comes up in so many conversations that I have with women who are perimenopausal, who are in that midlife stage of life, and that is overwhelm. It's that feeling of being constantly busy, stretched thin, trying to do everything or be everything for everyone, and then wondering at the same time why you're struggling with your energy, fat loss, and you're not feeling like yourself anymore. And if this does sound familiar, which for a lot of you, I'm sure it will, then in this episode, I plan to talk about why doing more isn't always the answer and the impact that stress can have on your body in more ways than you might realize. So a couple of weeks ago, I was having a conversation with a lovely woman who came to me because she was feeling completely overwhelmed. She's perimenopausal. She wasn't feeling happy with how she felt. Her energy was low. She felt uncomfortable in her body and stuck in this cycle of snacking and exhaustion. And I spoke to her again, actually, a couple of days ago. And she said to me that when she first spoke to me, she was really worried that I was going to tell her to exercise more or push harder with her diet. But I didn't, because that's not what she needed. And the reason that I could have that conversation with her is because she was very honest about what life was like. And it became very clear that she wasn't only physically exhausted, she was mentally exhausted too. She was mentally drained. She was getting up early every day around 5:30, having a coffee. And because it's coffee, she was having a couple of biscuits, because that's what you do, coffee, right? And then the snacking cycle would continue from there. She was making sure that her child was well fed, but she was eating on the go through the rest of the day, prioritizing everyone else, focused on making sure that everyone else was okay. And then clubs would come around in the evening. She'd end up eating late and going to bed feeling completely frazzled. And I bet a lot of you can relate to that. So what she needed was definitely not more workouts. Hey, I tell you what, you're feeling exhausted? Here, do these 3 workouts. That's going to make you feel better. And don't get me wrong, exercise can definitely make you feel better, but often we need to slow down a little bit before we start to speed up. And something that both gets mentioned quite a lot, but also not enough, is the impact that stress can have on our body. And here we're talking about chronic stress, and that can have real and measurable effects on our body. When you're constantly running on adrenaline, your body releases a hormone called cortisol, and it gets a bad rap, but it is actually something we need. It's a natural process. It's a natural stress response, and it can be really beneficial. It only becomes a problem when it stays elevated for too long, like it does when you are dealing with ongoing overwhelm, which can then increase your cravings for things that are high fat, high sugar foods. It can interfere with our hunger and our fullness signals. It can reduce the quality of our sleep. And yes, it can encourage some fat storage, particularly around our middle, around our abdomen. Now, you will see a lot of hacks and supplements out there saying, get your cortisol back in level. They're not going to be the thing that are going to help you. And you don't need to hack your hormones or anything like that. All I want to say is that it's going to be down to some lifestyle changes. There is no quick fix for that. Research does show that higher cortisol levels are associated with increased central fat deposition and insulin resistance, which actually this is more common in perimenopausal women anyway. And we do tend to cope with stress less well at this stage of life. There was a study in the Journal of Psychosomatic Medicine which showed that women with higher stress reactivity had more abdominal fat. And there was another paper in the American Journal of Physiology that found similar patterns in men as well. So it's not just women that can be impacted by this. But here's the thing that is very, very important, is that stress doesn't just come from big external things. And actually, those big external things, when you get like a moment of stress, it often doesn't last that long. That cortisol raise, it does its job. But when it becomes chronic, it can often be from the pressure that we put on ourselves, the mental load that we're carrying, being indecisive, not being able to make decisions, that constant list of things to do, and the guilt that we put on ourselves for not doing enough. It can build up slowly until our body starts to see this as a new normal. And then once stress becomes your baseline, you stop noticing it. But unfortunately, our hormones are still out of whack. And I know that for this lady in particular, she didn't think that she had any right to be stressed because she'd stopped working. So she should be able to do more, right? More. So she created a list of tasks to do, keeping herself so busy that actually she was just really exhausted. And I know that this happens quite a lot because I speak to women that goes, I've got no excuse really, I'm not even working. And it's like, well, you're doing a lot. And it doesn't matter whether that's in your job or at home or whatever else it is, you're doing a lot. So what did I tell this lovely lady to do instead of just piling more on her already very full plate? So instead, we just focused on a few things because I spoke to her for a while and I worked out that she wasn't doing things that she loved during the day. She was rushing her mornings and in that reactive stage all day. So we focused on the morning, a moment of self-care instead of a biscuit. So she could have a coffee and then do something calming instead of a biscuit. So it could be that you chose to do some meditation before your family wake up, or it could just be that you're sitting quietly with that coffee, looking at the view, just something short, just a moment of self-care, no biscuits. She actually said to me when I spoke to her a couple of days ago, are you going to start a new phrase? Breakfast over biscuits. Like I say, meals before snacks. Maybe it's going to become a thing. Breakfast before biscuits. Anyway, then we said about having 3 meals a day, sitting down, aiming just to not eat on the go. 3 meals. A little bit, and I say little bit here with emphasis, of planning in the evening to reduce that feeling of morning chaos, of that rushing and chasing your tail, so that you're going into the day feeling more in control. I've spoken about it on podcast loads before. It doesn't need to involve you making big plans, prepping loads of meals. It can literally be just thinking ahead and be like, what is coming up tomorrow? What am I going to have for breakfast? What am I needing to get ready in the morning? And then just seeing if there's anything you can do now to make your morning easier. It doesn't need to be much. Sometimes it is just enough to write down, like, tomorrow morning I'm having this. And I know that she said to me when I spoke to her the other day that she'd had baked beans on toast for breakfast, which is such an improvement on having biscuits and then just snacking through the day. Such a big improvement. And then we also spoke about how in the evening she was eating after she picked her son up from a club. He'd already eaten, but she was eating after she picked her son up from club. I suggested that she eat earlier so that when she got back, she could then wind down and head to bed without that feeling of being frazzled. When I spoke to her after a couple of weeks, less than a couple of weeks, I think it was, she said, and it was so lovely, she said her energy had improved. She felt calmer. She'd actually lost 4 pounds. But more importantly, her perimenopausal symptoms had actually improved. So she was suffering quite badly with joint aches and pains. And she loves walking and so on, but it was impacting that. So they'd improved and she was feeling much more in control and calmer. She was feeling good. She was finding it easier to make choices that aligned with her goal of fat loss because she was feeling calmer. She was sleeping better. And by fueling her body properly and reducing the stress and getting better sleep, her hormones have started to regulate themselves again. Yes, she can go and change her HRT if she needs to, of course. But menopausal symptoms aren't just going to be about the estrogen. They're also impacted by stress, by inflammation, and the things that we do in everyday life that we might have got away with before, right? And when we start to support our body, it does start to support us back, but it doesn't need to be huge, massive changes all at once, which I think we often think it is. Like, we add to the stress by telling ourselves we should be doing more. Sometimes we do just need to step back, sort out the calm, have a plan that we can actually commit to, and go from there. And I do think that while we're talking about overwhelm, it's important I talk to you about something that's said to me quite a lot by other people, by lots of women. And I think it is what derails a lot of people as well. It's been said to me, and I'm going to put this in kind of quotation marks, but I feel like I only have to look at cake to put on weight. So we eat some cake in the evening, perhaps, or whatever, and then we weigh ourselves the next morning and we've gained weight. And if you felt like that, you're not alone, because it's true. You will likely gain weight if you've eaten more of that type of food. But it's normally going to be water retention. If your calories over the week are where they should be, kind of as an average, then it's not going to be that you've suddenly gained a load of body fat overnight. I mean, it'd be pretty impressive if you did. There are so many things that can impact our weight, such as stress, poor sleep, inflammation. They can all cause weight to fluctuate. And if it's the only measure of progress that you're using, then that can add to that feeling of stress and being disheartened, especially because our weight can fluctuate at times where we're feeling pretty rubbish anyway. We're feeling hormonal. We have eaten in a way that we're annoyed with ourselves about having eaten like that. And then we've just proven to ourselves that, yeah, look what happens when you do that. And you always do that. So what's the point anyway? So it is important that we look at other markers to see our progress so that we can start enjoying the journey, because these are the things that you'll notice, or a lot of them you'll notice sooner. Some of them, like this lady, yes, she's lost 4 pounds, but even if she hadn't got on the scales, she would have started to notice that she was feeling better in general. And that's where feeling good on the journey, reducing stress, those things are going to have you feeling good now. They're going to make it easier to continue. They'll have you feeling better in the future. So you can look at things like energy levels, how you're sleeping, and see the progress you've made there, how your mood has improved or your mental calm, how you're now eating meals as opposed to snacks, and be like, I'm so consistently eating my meals now, even if they're not perfect. Then how your clothes fit, maybe they're feeling a little bit looser, even if the scales are not showing that you've lost a lot of weight. And then you can look at the scale weight, but I'd be looking at it as a trend over several weeks rather than over days. If you get on the scales and it's gone up, then you'd have to have been eating a lot more than a piece of cake for it to be body fat. And another thing that will help keep you going, because at this stage of life, when we are feeling overwhelmed, we are feeling stressed, and we're feeling like, oh my goodness, I don't know how I'm going to carry on with this. Well, then it's important that we plan for the chaos, not the calm, like I've said in podcasts previously. And then we have a clear understanding of those non-negotiable days and the optimal days. When I spoke to this lady more recently, she was like, I'm ready for more. Give me more. Throw it at me. I can do it. And what I was trying to make clear to her is, yes, I can give you something else to add into your routine, but I want to make it clear those strategies that we came up with before, they are your non-negotiable. We know that you can manage those even when life is really quite challenging, when you're feeling overwhelmed. So they can always be your fallback. So you go back to those, and then you just feel like you're starting to feel better again. And then for her, I then said, okay, cool. Exercise does, and she walks a lot already, but exercise boosts your mood. Getting up and getting moving boosts your mood and can make a difference to your day as well. So we gave her a morning routine, the one that I would give a lot of people on my coaching program: 10 bodyweight squats, 10 worktop press-ups, and 20 high knees. And actually, my eldest, who's autistic, he came down, it's Easter holidays, he came down in a mope yesterday. And he was kind of just going, oh, I just feel a bit, I don't know what he was saying. And I was listening to him. And in my head, I'm wanting to say, just get outside, do something. But, often people need to discover this for themselves. And I said, I do know something that can improve your mood really quickly if you're up for it. And he went, okay. And I said, stand up and do 10 squats, 10 press ups on the worktop, and 20 high knees. And I bet you that you're going to find that your energy's increased afterwards and you're going to smile. Anyway, he did that. I could not believe the change in him. It was greater than I expected. He went and did the job that he'd been putting off. He made dinner for us yesterday evening. It was amazing, the change in his mood just from getting up and moving his body. And then this morning, he came down to me again and he went, I've done 50 high knees. And then he did some worktop press ups and so on. We don't need to make that our non-negotiable, but how we start the day can really impact how we feel for the rest of the day. But even if you do that little thing a bit later, it's a nice fallback on to go, actually, this is what makes me feel good. This makes me feel good rather than reaching for the snack. Anyway, I'm going off on a tangent, but your non-negotiables should be the things you can manage even when life is really quite chaotic. For you, that might be focusing on having a decent breakfast, a similar one each day, or sitting down and eating your meals. It could be like, I am always going to sit down to eat, even when I'm really busy. I'm not going to start eating on the go. I'm going to sit down and have my breakfast, lunch and dinner. I'm going to have a big glass of water when I wake up. And I'm going to prioritize 5 minutes of calm each day. It's going to be different for everyone because everybody lives a different life. So what you can manage and what you can commit to is going to be different. And it does need to be something you can commit to, even when life is busy. I do set range targets. I've said before in podcasts, I set range targets for my clients when they sign up. And that will be a calorie range and that will be an activity range. But you know what? Sometimes before people even get into tracking steps and tracking their nutrition, they need to step back and actually think about the things that will make it easier. And that's where the habits come in. Now, which 3 habits can I fully commit to? And I give a list of habits for people to choose from. And I always love it when they choose things that are going to make life easier, like a little evening routine, like no phone in the bedroom. These are habits that we can look at committing that we think, oh, that's going to make a big impact to how I sleep and so on. And then on our optimal days, if we're just building up, we might start going, I'm going to do morning routine every morning, or I'm going to be doing a workout on those days, or I'm going to be going to bed optimally by 9:30 and getting 7 to 8 hours of sleep. I'm going to be getting a long walk each day, or I'm going to be prepping my meals on a Sunday. That could be optimal. It's not going to be perfect. You're not going to be able to do it every week, but some days you're going to feel like you can push for more. And that is the point that lovely lady's at, because it didn't take her long to feel better. So now she can start focusing on fat loss more. Brilliant. Game changing. You don't have to do it all. You just need to be able to do enough to stay in that steady place and then know that you can build up things when you're feeling lighter. So if you're listening to this and thinking, oh my goodness, that is me. I'm tired, stretched thin, unsure where to start. I want you to know this. You don't need to push harder, especially at this stage of life. It's about supporting yourself, giving yourself time, saying no more often so that you can say yes to the things that are important. Do something each day for you. Give your body what it actually needs: fuel, rest, self-care. And you might be surprised at how quickly things start to turn around. It isn't about doing more. It's about doing what matters most. And it really is slowing down to start with that can mean that things really start to speed up. I hope that you are having a beautiful week, that the Easter holidays are in full swing and going well. Thank you so much for listening. And as always, it would be amazing if you could subscribe and review this podcast so that more people can find it. You can find me on Instagram at Ruth MacFit. Waitlist is also open for those of you wanting some more support with your goals. You can head to www.ruthmacfit.com for more information, or of course, reach out to me on Instagram with any questions at all. I will speak to you all very, very soon. Goodbye.